Good morning everyone. In today's class we'll discuss about the registration requirement and registration process under GST Act. In case of GST, there is no centralized registration. Registration need to be taken state-wise, means that in every state, if supplier has place of business, then he has to take separate registration in each state. A business entity having its branches in multiple states will have to take separate state-wise registration for the branches in different states. Further, within a state, an entity with different branches would have single registration, wherein it can declare one place as principal place of business and other branches will be treated as an additional place of business. So if any entities have more than branches in the same state or within this state, in that case they can take a single registration for all its branches and they can declare one place of business as principal place of business and other will be as additional place of business. Another case where a business entity having separate business verticals in a state may obtain separate registration for each of its business verticals. Otherwise, a given PAN-based legal entity would have one registration number. So, if any business entity having separate business verticals means they have diversified businesses within a state, in that case they may obtain a separate registration for each of its business verticals. Otherwise, they can use a single number, GSTIN number also for all of its business. The registration under GST is PAN based, that is permanent account number based, and it is state specific. GSTN number, GST identification number, is a 15-digit number and a certificate of registration incorporating the GSTIN is made available to the applicant upon registration. In case of GSTIN, which is a identification number for GST taxpayers, is of 15 digits. The first 2 digits represent the state code. The next 10 digits represent the permanent account number. The 13th digit is the entity number of the same PAN holder in a state. If any business entity have more than one registration within the state, then that number will be the 13th number. The 14th is the alphabet Z by default, and the last digit is your sum digit of total 14 digits. So in this way the GSTIN number is issued. Registration under GST is not tax specific. It means that it requires only one single registration for any type of GST, either CGST, SGST, UTGST or IGST. They don't require to register separately for each type of GST. Section 22 explain about the person liable for registration. Section 22 of CGST Act 2017. The first, supplier engaged in exclusive supply of goods and whose aggregate turnover in the financial year exceed rupees 40 lakhs is required to obtain GST registration in the state or union territory from where the supply is initiated. So any supplier who is engaged in exclusively supply of goods, and if in any financial year his turnover, his aggregate turnover exceeds 40 lakhs, then he has to compulsorily register in that state. In case of special category states, the aggregate turnover limit is 20 lakhs or 10 lakhs in some of the states. Some special category states like Puducherry, Meghalaya, Mizoram, Tripura, Manipur, Sikkim, Nagaland, Arunachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand opted for turnover limit of 20 lakhs, and Kerala and Telangana still maintaining status quo limit of 10 lakhs. In case of supplier engaged in providing a taxable supply of services, the threshold limit for aggregate turnover for registration requirement is 20 lakhs rupees in a financial year. In case of special category states, if supplier is engaged in exclusively for supply of services, the threshold limit for GST registration is 10 lakhs rupees in a financial year. The registered taxable person, when transfers business to another person on going concern basis, or the business is transferred on account of succession or otherwise, in this cases also the transferee or the successor is liable to obtain GST registration. So if any time the business is transferred to any other person as a going concern, or through transfer is through will, in that case transferee or successor has to obtain new GST registration number. In case of transfer of a company, in case of amalgamation or demerger, in accordance with the order of court or tribunal, the same transferee company has to register under GST. In case of GST, the threshold limit is regarding aggregate turnover. So at the time of calculation of aggregate turnover, value of all outward supplies like taxable supplies, exempt supplies, exports, interstate supplies of persons having the same PAN be computed on all India basis. It means that when to calculate the aggregate turnover, all outward supply including taxable supply, exempted supply, export, interstate supply will be included in the total turnover calculation. But any type of GST, either it's CGST, SGST, UTGST, IGST or compensation cess, will not be a part of aggregate turnover. If in case of value of inward supplies on which tax is payable under reverse charge basis, that will also not be the part of aggregate turnover. Aggregate turnover to include total turnover of all branches with same PAN. For example, in case of a dealer X has two offices, one in Delhi and another in Haryana. In order to determine whether X is liable for registration, the turnover of both offices would be taken into account, and only if the turnover of both the offices Delhi and Haryana exceed 40 lakhs, then X will be liable for registration. Here in this example we can see XYZ Limited has two units, one is in Mumbai, another is in Manipur. If we aggregate the turnover of both the units, it's 37 lakhs and it is not exceeding the threshold limit, but the Manipur is the special category states and there the threshold limit for registration is 20 lakhs. So if in any of the unit the threshold limit exceed, the aggregate turnover will exceed the threshold limit, in that case that supplier has to register all its branches. So in this case the supplier has to register in Manipur and at the same time the Mumbai unit also. In case of value of exported goods, services, exempted goods or services, interstate supplies between distinct person having same PAN to be included in aggregate turnover. We already discussed that in case of aggregate turnover, all types of supply, either exported goods or services or exempted or interstate, all will be included in aggregate turnover. For example, in Rohan Oils, Punjab is engaged in supplying machine oil as well as petrol. Supply of petrol is not leviable under GST, but the supply of machine oil is taxable. So at the time of determination or turnover of both the supply, we will include the turnover of petrol also. Aggregate turnover to include all supplies made by a taxable person, whether on his own account or made on behalf of his principals. So even if the supply is made on behalf of the agent, then the turnover of the agent will also be included in the aggregate turnover of the principal. So, for example, Mohini Enterprises has appointed Messrs Best Foods and Associate as its agent. All the supplies of goods made by Messrs Best Foods and Associate as agent of Mohini Enterprises will also be included in the aggregate turnover of Messrs Best Food and Associates. Section 23 discuss about the persons not liable to registered. There are some persons who are not liable to register under GST. The first is any person engaged exclusively in the business of supplying goods or services or both that are not liable to tax or wholly exempt from tax under CGST Act or under the IGST Act. So if any person engaged exclusively in the supply of goods or services which are exempted or not liable to tax under GST, those persons are not liable to register under GST. An agriculturist, to the extent of supply of produce out of cultivation of land, is also not required to liable under GST. The government also may, on the recommendation of council, specify the category of person who may be exempted from obtaining registration under GST Act. Section 24 list out the persons who require to compulsory registered under GST. In case of any person who is making interstate supply, casual taxable person making taxable supply, even the casual taxable person is a person who is supplying goods or services on casually or on occasionally, even then he has to compulsory register. Person who is required to pay tax under reverse charge is also compulsory required for registration. Person supplying goods through electronic commerce operator, any person who is registered on any electronic platform, for example any person who is registered on Amazon or Flipkart or any other electronic commerce operator, then that person has to compulsory register under GST. Any non-resident taxable person also required to register under GST. Person who are required to deduct tax at source also has to compulsory register under GST. Any supply which is done by the agent or otherwise input service distributor also has to compulsory register. Every electronic commerce operator has to register. Supplier of OIDR services, online information database access retrieval services from outside India to a person in India or a registered person. This is an example of, like in case of a Netflix, Hotstar or other information database services which are providing these services from outside India to a person in India, either registered or unregistered, they also have to compulsory registered. And any class of person notified by the government council will also have to compulsory register under GST. Procedure for registration. Let's talk about the procedure for registration, that is explained in section 25, that application to be filed in online in each state or union territory within 30 days. The day when the aggregate turnover of supplier exceeds the threshold limit, within 30 days he should apply online in each state or union territory from where he is supplying his goods or services. In case of casual dealer or non-resident, they have to apply for registration 5 days prior to commencement of their business. If any person is supplying goods or services from territorial waters of India, he has to take registration in the coastal state or union territory where the nearest point of appropriate baseline is located. In case of failure of registration within the time limit, the proper officer may proceed to register such person in such manner as may be prescribed. In case of registration of any special agencies of United Nations organizations or any multilateral financial institutions such as WHO, a unique identity number has been granted to such specialized agencies. A person, though not liable to be registered under section 22 or 24, he may get himself registered voluntarily under GST Act, and all the provisions of this act will be applicable to that person as applied to other registered persons. A person who have more than one registration, each such registration be treated as distinct person. A person who have make registration in respect of an establishment and have more than one establishment, for each establishment will be treated as establishment of distinct persons. For registration requirement, permanent account number or 10, that is tax deducted or at source or collection at source account number is mandatory for grant of registration. Non-resident may get the registration without PAN number or TIN number as per the prescribed documents. If we talk about the registration process, first the supplier has to apply for registration in form number GST registration 1. The form number GST 1 registration divided into two parts. In first part A, you have to fill the requirement regarding PAN number, email, mobile verification, etc. And part B will include the details, other details regarding the business. Once the application is submitted to the registration GST portal, an acknowledgement form will be issued to the applicant in GST registration number 2, and the applicant will submit all relevant documents on this portal. Then the application will be verified by the GST authorities within 3 working days. Initial verification will be done within 3 working days. If they need any clarification or information, they will issue clarification or a show cause notice in form number GST registered 3, registration form number 3. Applicant will furnish the clarification or the details or the information required in form number GST 4 within 7 working days. The GST authorities will approve within 3 working days. If GST authorities are satisfied with the clarification or information given by the applicant, then approval for registration will be given in next 7 days. If clarification not satisfactory, then rejection will be intimated to the applicant in form number registration 5. If no information is received by the applicant, then it will be assumed that the registration is granted and no action if taken within 3 to 7 working days. So the whole process, the set process of registration will take 17 days, and after that registration certificate will be issued in form number GST registration 6. If any point of time that the registered person wants to make any changes or amendment in the registration process, he may apply to again the GSTN portal, GSTN authority, within submission of application within 15 days of change. If there is any change in the information submitted by the registered person to the authority, he may file an application within 15 days of change. Then GST authorities will verify that application, and if the change is related to known core areas, then they will amend the registration certificate. If the change is related to core area, then proper officer may grant permission within next 15 days. If proper officer is of the opinion that the amendment is unwarranted or documents furnished are incomplete or incorrect, in that case proper officer will serve a show cause notice that why this application should not be rejected. After receiving show cause notice from the proper officer, the registered person has to reply within 7 working days. If reply is satisfactory, then application for amendment will be done. If the proper officer will not be satisfied with the clarification, then application for amendment will be rejected. In case of cancellation of registration under section 29, cancellation can be done by the proper officer or maybe by the applicant. First we'll discuss about the cancellation done by the proper officer suo motu or on application made by the registered taxable person. In case of transfer of business or discontinuation of business, the registered person may apply for cancellation of registration under GST. If there is change in the constitution of business, for example, partnership firm may be changed to sole proprietorship due to death of one of the partner, then it will lead to change in the PAN number. So the registered person has to apply for cancellation of the registration. Or if the person is no longer liable to be registered under section 22 or 24, in that case also he may apply for cancellation of registration. Cancellation can be done by the proper officer including retrospective date if the registered taxable person has contravened provision of any of the act. If a composition supplier has not furnished return for 3 consecutive tax periods, or any other person has not furnished return for a continuous period of 6 months. So if a composition dealer has failed to submit his returns for 3 consecutive tax periods, or other than the composition dealer, if any registered person failed to file return for a continuous period of 6 months, then proper officer may cancel the registration. In case of non-commencement of business within 6 months from the date of registration, in that case also proper officer may cancel the registration. Where registration has been obtained by means of fraud, willful statement or suppression of fact, then after giving opportunity of being heard, proper officer may cancel the registration. The last we'll discuss about the revocation of cancellation of registration. Under section 30, any registered person whose registration is cancelled by the proper officer, then he may apply to officer for revocation of cancellation in the prescribed manner within 30 days from the date of service of order. Proper officer as per prescribed manner either revoke cancellation or reject the application. Application can't be rejected without giving an opportunity of being heard. So before rejecting the application for cancellation of registration, proper officer will give opportunity of being heard to the registered person. And revocation of cancellation under CGST will be a deemed revocation under SGST also, and vice versa. Thank you very much.